Greetings folks, I'm Ronwise Gamgee and welcome to Quick and Dirty Roleplaying. In this video, I'll talk about what it is to play a game about roleplaying. So, as we all know, the term TTRPG stands for Tabletop Role-Playing Game. The tabletop portion refers to the setting or location of play, which is on a tabletop. The role-playing portion refers to the central activity of the game, which is role-playing. And the game portion refers to the fact that there is a structure in place to direct the form of play involved. So some actions are allowed during this form of play and others are not. The actions that are allowed or disallowed are ultimately arbitrary, but this is what makes an activity or a series of activities a game as opposed to not a game. There are certain segments of the hobby, such as those who advocate for 4D role-playing, or those who adopt the Nordic LARP style of play, that hold steadfast the idea that if players do not role-play their characters in a way that is, by and large, indistinguishable from method acting, then they're not really role-playing. Granted, in the context of TTRPGs, dressing up as one's character, physical acting, and even doing their character's voice is not expected, at least for the 4D role-playing advocates, in order to achieve the level of immersion required of method acting in this format. But this is what they consider to be proper role-playing when playing a tabletop role-playing game. They also still use the rules of the tabletop role-playing game system they're using in order to resolve uncertain outcomes, all while staying in character, ideally from start to finish, and adapting their method acting in accordance to the resolution mechanics employed. But are the games they're using themselves games about role-playing, or are they functionally no better than consequence generators or physics simulators used to randomly determine the outcomes of uncertain actions that are set apart from pure GM arbitration while having no meaningful impact on the role-playing, apart from the player's volition to express the mechanical effects through method acting? If the act of role-playing, as described by 4D role-playing advocates and Nordic LARPers, is not enforced by the TTRPG system in question, can the game itself be called a role-playing game? Before we answer that question, let's go to the other end of the spectrum, that of pure technical gaming. For this, let's use Pathfinder 2nd Edition as an example. Pathfinder 2nd Edition is written in such a detailed fashion that given the rules and some published adventuring material, such as an adventure path, a technically proficient Pathfinder GM simply acts as a referee of the rules and the administrator of the module. As a player, the game can technically be played without any role-playing at all. All players need to do is dictate their character's actions as well as the game mechanics and procedures they're employing. The GM is there to ensure that everyone follows the rules as written, as well as controlling the NPC's behavior. The GM doesn't even need to roleplay their NPCs, as they can simply dictate their actions as well as the game mechanics and procedures they're employing. That is not to say that players and GMs don't speak in the first person as their characters, but sincere and expressive performances through identifying with, understanding, and experiencing a character's inner motivation and emotions are absolutely vestigial to the running of Pathfinder 2nd Edition, whereas doing things when the game rules don't permit it, such as raising a shield without spending one of your 3 actions, or reducing the damage you take with a shield block or with a shield without a class feature or a feat that lets you use the shield block reaction, is simply not allowed. To do otherwise would be to cease playing Pathfinder 2nd Edition in that instance, or at least it would be playing a variation of Pathfinder 2nd Edition with house rules. Pathfinder 2nd Edition even describes a role-playing game as an interactive story where the GM sets the scene and presents challenges, while other players take the roles of player characters and attempts to overcome those challenges. Later on, it continues stating that the GM prepares, presents, and presides over the game's world and story, posing challenges and playing adversaries, allies, and bystanders alike, while, as each scene leads into the next, each player contributes to the story, responding to situations according to the personality and abilities of their characters. Dice rolls, combined with pre-assigned statistics, add an element of chance and determine whether characters succeed or fail at actions they attempt. So there is mention of players responding to a situation according to the personality and the abilities of their character, which speaks to the players doing things as their characters. In the section titled The Players, it is mentioned how some players enjoy acting out or role-playing what they do as if they were their characters, while others describe their characters' actions as if narrating a story, and to do whatever feels best. By the way, I agree that one should do whatever feels best with regards to playing a tabletop role-playing game, but that's besides the point with regard to the subject matter of games about role-playing. So even the Pathfinder 2nd Edition core rulebook explicitly states that acting out what your characters would do, or role-playing, is optional when playing Pathfinder 2nd Edition, because the rules of the game don't have anything to do with role-playing. With both the Nordic LARP / 4D role-playing advocates on one end, and games like Pathfinder 2nd Edition on the other, when played in a purely technical manner, the rules of the games they often play and the activity of acting out what their characters do are completely divorced from each other. The role-playing is purely optional, and in this respect, where the rules of play don't require players to role-play, these games fail to be games about role-playing. So what kind of games are games about role-playing? Let's look to games that are powered by the apocalypse to find out, using Avatar Legends as an example, mainly because I own the book and it's a great example of a PBTA style of game. In Avatar, like any other powered by the apocalypse game, the main activity during the session is the conversation the players and the narrator have about what's happening in the game world. There's a school of thought within certain role-playing circles that would say that this makes such a game not a role-playing game, but a story game, because the players and the GM act as if they're in a writer's room, which is true, and this breaks immersion, which is sacrosanct to them. But simply because a player goes from talking about what's happening in the game in an out-of-character fashion doesn't preclude them from switching back to role-playing their character in a completely immersed manner akin to the method actor. But the question is this: is acting out as your character would necessary in Avatar Legends? In order to activate specific game mechanics and procedures in play, the players need to trigger them by having their characters do specific actions within the fictional world, which can be done in the third-person perspective, the non-role-playing perspective. Many of these game mechanics in Avatar Legends can actually force the player characters to behave in specific ways and thus restrict player agency, depending on their dice rolls. When it comes to creating a believable, emergent game world, this is actually a very good thing, as it enforces a distinction between the character and the player, as opposed to games that don't have these kinds of mechanics, which are the vast majority of what we refer to as tabletop role-playing games. Like many powered by the apocalypse style of games, Avatar Legends is a game primarily focused about dramatic stories, as opposed to being primarily focused about presenting challenges to the players for them to overcome via their rules mastery and their characters' abilities. However, powered by the apocalypse style PBTA games like Avatar Legends do not require that the players act as their characters or immerse themselves through their character's eyes or skin. These activities can definitely enhance the experience of TTRPG play, but they're not technically required. Likewise, procedures and game mechanics that restrict and direct character action can be a powerful tool to enhance the experience of method acting as your character, but they're technically not required. So, because they don't require role-playing as defined by 4D role-playing advocates, are games like Pathfinder 2nd Edition, Avatar Legends, Pendragon, and so on actually tabletop role-playing games? If a tabletop role-playing game is supposed to be a game about role-playing, a structure of play that requires role-playing, then no, they're not. But what games are actually games about role-playing as defined in this manner? There's improv theater, but there's no game involved there. Those are performances. There's also stuff like BDSM roleplay, but again, there's no game involved unless you consider the structure of play as defined by the DOM as the game. I honestly don't know what kind of games are games about role-playing. I do like playing games where people collaboratively create stories in an emergent manner, and these games are colloquially called tabletop role-playing games. And even though role-playing is completely optional in these games, I like to role-play my characters, and I like to engage in the writer's room activity of the conversation I'm having with the other players and the GM, because I enjoy that activity. That actually enhances the experience for me. Regarding rules like those presented in Avatar Legends, where depending on the outcome, they force me to roleplay my character in a specific way, that actually adds to my enjoyment of the tabletop roleplay experience. Now, I will be completely down to engage with some 4D roleplay, should I ever find a group that is up for it. And though I may flub it as I get acclimated, as long as I'm not getting my balls busted for it, I'll try my best to adhere to total character immersion. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. If you'd like to leave a comment, please keep it respectful and relevant. Until next time, take care, folks, and play to find out what happens.